for authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio, listener-supported radio where no topic is taboo. Joining me today is going to be Stephen Myers. He's the author of Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid and the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, which we're going to talk about that today. But we also wanted to go into the problems of Egyptology, and if we get time, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Orion Correlation and any of the other angles that we can cover while we're still live on the air. Don't forget your donations and clicking on my ads keeps me censorship free and keeps me live on the air. It's the means of survival for the show. And don't forget to invite friends. If you guys would like to call in during the show, the call-in number's 832-632-7904. Alternatively, you can always type questions into the chat room. So, Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be on your show, Royce.
I'll be honest with you, I've kind of missed you since the last time you was on my show, but I've been so busy I hadn't been in touch.
Yeah, we had a great show. It's been several years ago, but we'll have to update all the exciting things that's been going on.
Now, if I remember last time you was on my show, we were talking about your first book, and I don't think your second one was out yet, was it?
I don't think it was at all, just my first book, but I do have my second book out. It's called The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. And it's about how the Great Pyramid wasn't just a tomb or a static device, but it was a machine that provided prosperity for the civilization that built it.
Okay. Well, going back to the first book, we'll touch on that and lead into the other one. When you and me last talked, some of the things I think we discussed was the means they were getting the stones down the Nile River and off the boats. But another thing I think, because it's been a few years, was we were discussing technology that you had on pictures inside the pyramid that looked like modern-day technology could not have been done back in that time. Something like hinge pieces or something like that. I mean, I may get it wrong. It's an old memory. But does any of that sound anywhere near to familiar to you?
Oh, yeah, certainly. The Great Pyramid has a number of places that there are slots, and in the antechamber between the Grand Gallery and the King's Chamber, there's some slots, and we think that those slots held large stones that slid up and down these slots, and they were part of a valve system, and that's what that was all about. And anyway, we think that the Great Pyramid was built using water locks and barges, and they moved the stones all the way up from the Nile River all the way up to the building site on these water locks, like in the Panama Canal or the Erie Canal.
Sounds pretty interesting. I was going to mention that since that day we talked, I come across a video by a guy that was debunking the ancient alien theory, and one of the theories I'm sure you're familiar with is that it was alien technology that enabled us to build the pyramid in the first place. And this guy, part of his argument was that if you look at the stones, there's like 6 to 8 holes in each stones that he believes was used for running cable to hoist the stones up into place. And I was just wondering if you could shed any further light on that than what he was.
Well, there's certainly a lot of ideas and conjecture about how the Great Pyramid was built, and there's scholarly debate, certainly, about virtually every aspect of the Great Pyramid. But a lot of the explanations are not accompanied with demonstrations. It's difficult to...
Still theoretical because they hadn't been actually demonstrated.
Right. So an idea of cables that the ancient people of the Nile would have that's strong enough to lift the massive payloads, and that's, I believe, has not been demonstrated. But moving heavy payloads on barges has been demonstrated. And everyone agrees that many of the stones were moved on barges because some of the quarries are across the river from the Great Pyramid.
They might never have to get across that river somehow, wouldn't they?
Yes, and we take the idea of using barges a step further, and that they use water locks to take the stones all the way up to the building site and ultimately construct the Great Pyramid using water. We have a video series on our website, which is at thepump.org. And at that website, the video series shows a lot of computer-generated animations of how the water locks were used to lift the stones to great height, and also how the most largest stones were moved, and even how the capstone was set in place.
Which capstone's missing nowadays.
Yes. There's no capstone on the Great Pyramid, and if there had been one, this video shows a method that that heavy stone would have been moved up to that great height and then set in place.
Yeah, that was one of the things I had questioned myself is, from my understanding, if I got it correctly, this pyramid's like 450 feet high. I understand moving stones are great height, but I mean, that's pretty extremely great height, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but we're talking the use of water locks from the one end of the Erie Canal to the other end is higher than that. So, and they lifted barges on water locks. So the height is not unreasonable, and we show how that was accomplished by having a series of water locks up the north face of the Great Pyramid, and that was able to move the stones up higher and higher, and the Great Pyramid was built level by level. So when one level was completed, they went to the next higher level, and then ultimately built the Great Pyramid.
I kind of begin to wonder now, because I'd said before to friends and family that I had serious doubts about that guy that was theorizing about the cables, because I had trouble imagining cables being strong enough to support that kind of massive weight. However, now that I'm talking to you, the thought occurs to me about what if these cables were used in conjunction with the water logs?
Well, that's interesting to consider. It would be nice to know the exact procedure that he has proposed. Does he have a book or anything out?
He has some YouTube videos out, but I'd have to go look it up and find it again.
Oh yeah. There's a bunch of those out there. But again, our video series is from. You can get to it from thepump.org, which is our website.
He did have a website, but I fail to remember the name of it. I mean, I saw this some 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't always bookmark everything, as well as I should, and oftentimes I wish I had when I get ready to go back.
Oh, I know the feeling, that's for sure.
But I must say, even though I can't say I agreed with the guy eye to eye, I thought he had some interesting proposals in there. I'm the kind of guy you don't necessarily have to be on an overall same page with somebody to be able to give the devil their dues, in other words.
Oh, certainly, and there's a lot of different ideas, but most alternative researchers understand that using a massive ramp that Egyptologists talk about, that massive ramp is an unworkable idea, and that's why Egyptology has never demonstrated how working people were able to move stones. Egyptology can't make a single casing stone like those that were at the Great Pyramid, those precision-cut stones that were on the outside of the Great Pyramid, and they've never moved a heavy stone, around the corner of a spiral ramp. And Egyptology, of course, has never moved the largest stones of the Great Pyramid even 1 inch. the entire science has never done it. So it's there's a lot of interest in alternative ideas because of the failure of
No doubt.
ufology.
I mean, I even read about one guy. Again, I didn't bookmark him, but he was theorizing that they were actually making molds of the casing stones or some of the other stones and actually pouring cement into them, or cement limestone, to actually make them in place, in other words.
Oh, certainly. Poured in place like a big cement bricks, if you will. There's that idea on the internet, though. You can word search that, and there's proponents, but there's also people that talk about some issues with those ideas. So yes, there's a whole host of ideas that I hope the audience researches and considers all the information out there and make their own decision.
Well, on your site, thepump.org, do you kind of give a little attention to everybody's side of the story, or does it reflect mostly your own personal theories?
Well, that website you mentioned is the website for our nonprofit foundation that we have, and it's dedicated to understanding how the Great Pyramid was built and why. But the focus of our website is relative to our specific research that we're conducting on how the Great Pyramid was built.
Now, if I'm getting the understanding correctly, your first book deals with how the pyramid was built, and your second book deals with why it was built?
That is correct.
Which makes a lot of sense. So that kind of, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, leads me to wonder about what made you think it was built as a prosperity machine?
Well, we looked at all the possible reasons why the Great Pyramid was built. If the Great Pyramid was built to be a tomb, it was very ineffective because it didn't protect the pharaoh's treasure or his mummy. And if it was built to be some kind of in the Middle Ages, they thought it was a granary. Well, that's not an effective answer to why it was built. But we looked at all the evidence, and we looked at how it was made and everything, and then we thought that it was built as an investment, that the Great Pyramid wasn't built at a massive cost, but that it returned a return for the people that built it. It was sort of like building what's a good example?
A bar and a casino.
A hydroelectric dam. They built a hydroelectric dam, let's say, the Hoover Dam, at a huge cost, but the return was 1,000 times over with all the electricity it made. And based on how we think the Great Pyramid was designed with all of the complex passages and chambers, we think that the Great Pyramid was used as infrastructure for the civilization that built it, and that it provided a return. And that return was that it was a machine that pumped water. And that water was used to power machinery. It was used for irrigation, of course, in scientific experiments, and a whole host of other purposes. So the Great Pyramid wasn't just a tombstone, for a mummy, but it was a machine that provided prosperity for the people that built it.
Well, have y'all been able to demonstrate the theory?
What we're doing with our foundation is that we want to redevelop this ancient high technology, this efficient water pump, for our modern but very troubled world. We are working on it. That's what we're doing. It's certainly a funding intense project to build a proof of concept model, if you will. But that's what we're doing. That is a purpose of our foundation. we're also doing crowdfunding to acquire a 3D printer. So you can find out more about that. We're about halfway through with raising the funding to get this 3D printer to help us make a pump, if you will. And they can get more information about that at thepump.org. But that's what we're doing. We want to provide an alternative to using fossil fuels or even hydroelectric generated electricity, which has some adverse environmental impacts, and of course an alternative to nuclear generated electricity. So that's what we're about. We're a humanitarian and research nonprofit foundation developing this ancient but very high technology that's from our very distant past.
A lot of technology's been lost down through the ages too. You think the pyramid might have served more than one purpose?
We're researching that, but my tendency is that it's a single-purpose device. Well, most everything serves more than one purpose. Even the Hoover Dam generates electricity, but it also is used for flood control. So certainly those two purposes are very interrelated, but I think that the primary purpose of the Great Pyramid was to be like a prosperity machine. And I don't know or can actually validate any other purpose for the Great Pyramid.
Well, you know, I've read a lot about the pyramid in relation to lighting because there was some petroglyphs on the walls way in deep is what I'm given to understand that nobody could have saw to have actually engraved them or painted them. They were so far back, it was so dark. There was not enough oxygen from what I understand to keep the torches lit. And if you look on the wall, there's a picture of what appears to be a huge oversized light bulb. And some people are theorizing that they had power in the pyramid. And using the kind of prosperity machine you're talking about, sounds like it could actually power or generate the electricity for the pyramid if they did do that.
Yes, most of those hieroglyphs are in tombs and temples, that type of thing. But yes, in modern times, we used water that's elevated that can move through a turbine to generate electricity. And the Great Pyramid water pump, in effect, elevated water, and that one of its purposes would be to have generated electricity. Also, they could have generated compressed air and static electricity, too. So there's a whole host of applications.
Which all of that is infrastructure.
Yeah, all of that are applications in ancient times, but in modern times, the two primary applications are, of course, irrigation and also the generation of electricity. So it's kind of interesting what we're doing, and I hope people will visit our website to get an idea of our mission statement and our how we are funded and some of our activities, and visit our video series and watch it. So I hope people do visit our website.
Oh, I'm quite sure they will. It's been there, goodness, since you and me had our last interview way back at Blog Talk Radio. And I'm pretty sure you built up some traffic over the years.
Yes, there's been a lot of interest in the books. Both of my books are available in softcover, but also in Kindle ebook format, so people can download them for their Kindles, and that's been quite popular.
Now, I think I recently saw your profile page with your picture on it on the Giza Pyramid site, so I'm assuming you're one of the researchers with their program, aren't you?
Yes, the Great Pyramid of Giza Research Association.
That's the one.
Yes, and I'm involved with that, and they can see a page. It doesn't have a lot of information, but at the Great Pyramid of Giza Research Association, and that's a wonderful group of a whole, gambit of ideas about pyramids and that type of thing. So people can get a lot of ideas from there.
Yeah, I know a few of the members over there, like Dennis Balpazer and Stephen Myler.
Yes.
Really
John
fantastic
Salvo.
researchers.
Oh yeah. A lot going on. It's actually an exciting field. The Great Pyramid, books are coming out every year about it. More books have been written about the Great Pyramid than any other building on Earth. And there's so much information, different ideas, and that type of thing. And an idea that the Great Pyramid was built in an efficient manner using water locks, and also to be a functioning machine is a direction of research that a lot of people find very attractive.
I know a friend of mine that was one of the researchers over there, Dennis Balpazer, and he was telling me that the Kemetans who was actually in charge of the place before the Egyptians was, but they sound like a much less evolved species than the Egyptians were.
That could be. The focus of my research is not who built the Great Pyramid, but how it was built, and also why it was built. So that's beyond the scope of my research.
Right, I understand.
Built it.
So, why don't you tell everybody real quick, roughly what kind of stuff you covered in the book that you think would be of interest to people, without giving away the candy store, of course.
Well, the first one is Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, and it discusses how people actually moved heavy stones. Now, Egyptologists tell a story, but they can't do any of it. But much of the idea of using water locks has been demonstrated many, many times. So it incorporates water locks with the Great Pyramid. And my second book, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, describes in detail how the complex passages and chambers of the Great Pyramid acted like a water pump. And it talks all about the input and the output, and it's kind of technical in some places. But if you want to find a book that gives meaning to all of these different chambers and passages, then I would certainly suggest my second book, and people can read it and see if they think that it's a viable alternative to other ideas about the Great Pyramid.
The problem I have with the idea of a water pump theory comes from my knowledge of modern day technology, that you're talking about a machine. A machine has moving parts. We know that the pyramid does not. So what causes the water to actually pump where it's supposed to pump? You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Actually, there are moving parts in the Great Pyramid. There are sliding stones, and there were, at one time, pivoting stones. And we think that those stones acted as the moving element in check valves, if you will.
Really?
Yes, and the like a hydraulic ram water pump consists of just some chambers and a few check valves, and it uses the power of the kinetic energy of water moving down a shaft to pump water up. And the input, we think, of the Great Pyramid was the descending passage, and water moved down into the subterranean chamber about 100 feet below the Great Pyramid, and was able to compress air, and that compressed air pumped water up, and that supplied the water for the water locks, and then the various passages and chambers inside the Great Pyramid were able to function as a water pump. It's kind of a complex manner, but in the Grand Gallery, which is built air and water tight, we think that hydrogen was generated, and hydrogen, when it's combusted in an enclosed chamber, will create a vacuum. and that vacuum helped draw water up. And we talk about how that operated in great detail in my book.
Sounds almost like a perpetual motion water pump.
Kind of, if I can use that word. But isn't a hydroelectric dam, the Hoover Dam, isn't it a perpetual motion machine?
Well, there's a yes and a no to that, I think.
Yes and no.
Because
That's a good
most
answer.
people would tell you there is no such thing as a perpetual motion machine that's ever been invented. However, having said that, there have been some that haven't been, made public knowledge that if they weren't actual perpetual motion machines, they were very close to it.
Right. But we certainly get more energy out of a hydroelectric dam than we put into it.
Which sounds an awful lot like free energy, as they call it, or zero point energy.
Kind of, in a way, but again, the Great Pyramid water pump, they used hydrogen to ultimately create a vacuum, and they also used the power of gravity to help compress air. And we think that this, on a grand scale, was very efficient, but we think that we can redevelop this type of technology to
power entire cities off of one pyramid. Power entire cities off of one pyramid.
Possibly. That's one way to go. Another way to go would be to decentralize the power source and use just polypropylene containers and PVC pipe, and they can, like, individuals can make these water pumps. We're trying to design it so you can use as much off-the-shelf parts as possible, and then from there, you don't need the pyramid shape, just the passages and chambers, if you will, and then ultimately people could generate all the electricity that they would need.
Now, one of the things you was talking to me about before was the problems with Egyptology, and I know that there's been a lot of controversy around Zawi Hawes, I think that's how you pronounce it, but I don't think that's what you were referring to, was it?
There is controversy about him. He was the head of the Antiquities Department in Egypt, but he's not the head anymore. But he's still out there. A lot of controversy about him.
Still has influence.
Egyptology in general has got a lot of problems in that they consider themselves to be a science, but they don't engage in the scientific method and demonstrate, just basic things that they say that they know how it was done, but then they can't do it. It's like talking about how a cow jumps over the moon, but it's impossible. It's impossible to use hand tools to cut stone to the precision that is seen at the Great Pyramid. It can't be done. So, but Egyptologists who can't do it still tell those same stories over and over and over in their books and, at the lectures in colleges. So they can't do that. They can't move heavy stones in the manner that they say it was done. So I'm sure that there's a lot that they've gotten wrong that people need to be aware of, including the sequence of pyramid construction, what they were used for, even who built them. So there's certainly some foundational issues about Egyptology that more and more people are becoming less satisfied with, certainly. And that's why so many alternative researchers can get a foot in the door, is because of the failure of Egyptology to really present demonstrations that validate their stories.
They want you to take their word at face value, and they haven't been able to do it themselves.
That is correct. What they want to do is declare edicts and then have us believe them. And that's only a viable way to do things in a religion, not in a science.
Don't work out so good in religion, if you ask me. I'm not real big on religion. I'm pretty big on God, but not on religion.
Fair enough. Hallelujah, brother.
But having said that, there was something I was going to mention about. Why do you suppose they're not willing to reevaluate their facts and come up with something new?
Oh, that's easy. That's the nature of the human condition. They found the Piltdown skull. Okay, the Piltdown skull was found. The leading experts said in anthropology said that's a missing link. Well, it took 40 years for anthropology, the science, to say, well, that's not really a missing link, that's a forgery. And the reason why it took 40 years is because it took a whole generation of experts to die off. And then the new generation of people that came up to be anthropologists already knew that it was a forgery, but nobody changed their minds. And it's the same with Egyptology. You know, they sit in a classroom and they're told, oh, yeah, they cut those stones with hand tools, or they drug them up a ramp. Oh, yeah, okay. And then they become Egyptologists and tell the same story again. But there's less and less people that believe them anymore. Egyptology is in a crisis very similar to another science called phrenology, which was the study of the bumps on people's heads and how it relates to your personality traits. And that was a science. They taught it in college, you know, in the 1910, let's say. They taught it in college, and you could become a professional phrenologist. And there were books and everything. The only problem was it couldn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method, and it went away. Well, Egyptology is got a similar crisis that they're facing. You know, even though there's every library on earth has all books about the stones being cut by hand, but it literally can't be done. So a time will come when we will just look at those books and smile and wonder why people believe that and think it's very quaint and almost silly notions, but we're not there yet. It all takes time.
How hard are these stones? I mean, they're not the kind that turns to dust fairly reasonably easy.
There's some granite in the Great Pyramid, and it's quite hard. But the limestone that is used in the Great Pyramid is not real hard. But we're not talking about hardness. We're talking about precision, and that's a big difference. You know, the casing stones, which were on the outside, were cut to about 1/100th of an inch precision over a surface of 5 by 7 feet, and can't do it by hand.
And the claims being made is that it's done with hammer and chisel.
That's what Egyptologists say in every book and in every TV documentary. Oh, yeah, they used hammer and chisels and just chiseled it out. Well, you can chisel out limestone, but you can't create the precision.
Well, I'm not sure about limestone. I haven't worked with it personally or learned much about it other than what you hear about the pyramids. But I do know that when you're dealing with a hammer and chisel with stone, there's always a high risk of chipping.
Yes.
Especially things that are more likely to turn to powder when struck than, say, granite is. And yes. even with granite, there's a risk of cracking, in other words.
Oh, yeah. And but the Great Pyramid used extremely large stones.
That's my whole point. I mean, how can they use this kind of technology that leaves this kind of markage over a 5-foot area without having a crack or a chip or a breakaway anywhere, in other words?
I know. It's a mystery. And how the stones were cut is actually a mystery. And if you understand that Egyptologists are wrong, then you're further along than the entire science of Egyptology.
Well, as I give them to understand, Egyptology also tells you that it took, I want to say 200,000 men, 20 years, moving a stone a minute to build the pyramid.
They do say that, but
that doesn't sound very highly likely either.
Yeah, it's not, especially the manner that they say it was done. It can't be done because Egyptologists, who are supposedly highly trained experts, can't do it. But the Egyptologists say, oh yeah, peasants and working people could do it, but us experts, we can't do it. So it's strange. It's a strange science, let me put it that way. You there?
Yeah, pardon me. I'm sorry about that. I had to cough.
Oh, that's all right.
Perhaps, maybe only Hebrews can do it.
Well,
I'm sorry. I just had to put that one in there.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, there's some say that it was the Jews that built the Great Pyramid, but still, they certainly can't make a casing stone. So there's alternative technology that was involved in terms of stone cutting, and the casing stones that we've been talking about were cemented together watertight. So the few stones that are still at the Great Pyramid are still cemented together watertight. So that is a...
So the idea was to make sure water didn't escape out of the pyramid.
Right. Well, yeah, especially during construction because it was built level by level. And our video series at our website depicts that in great detail on how the process of using these water locks and barges to assemble the Great Pyramid.
Well, if they're using it to build a water pump, why do you suppose they put a king's and queen's chamber into it?
Well, that's what we call them. They have no markings in them that depict what the names of them are. That's just what modern people call them. But those chambers, both of those chambers are, again, built with great precision and cemented together using a very strong bonding agent. And we think that precision was not to keep the pharaoh's soul from symbolically leaking out, but to have pressure vessels, if you will, that was used in the water pumping process. And it's an odd explanation for the Great Pyramid to be a tomb when you have so many passages and chambers, but the pharaoh only had like one mummy. And then they talk about these vents that point out for the soul to escape, but the pharaoh only had like one soul, so why did he need multiple vents? You know, their explanation is odd, to say the least.
You know, another thing I remember being questioned was, why was the only contents of the room the sarcophagus?
Well, my explanation is that the reason why the only contents is that the sarcophagus is actually larger than the passage that leads to the king's chamber, so it hasn't been stolen, since ancient times or even modern times. But I believe that there was some apparatus in the Great Pyramid, electrolysis plates, I believe, and some other things. But all of that has been stolen by, vandals, scrounges, defilers, and that type of thing. Anything that they could take out to trade for a goat or whatever. So all of that is gone. And you've seen a similar thing in modern times with in Iraq. When the civilization has recently collapsed with war and everything, everyone runs to the museums and steals everything so they can go sell it to get something to eat. So it's the natural order of things.
Yeah, I was never really thought about it until you just now said it, that the sarcophagus might have been built in place rather than brought in later after being built, in other words.
Yes, most people agree that that's the case, and that's why it's still there, is because no one can steal it.
Well, that would definitely work. Is there anything unusual about the sarcophagus that might explain a purpose it served?
Well, it's made out of a single piece of granite, the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid, and it's been damaged quite a bit, but there appears to have been something attached to it, if you will. There's some places that are where you could put pins in, if you will. Most people would say that's the lid for the sarcophagus, but we think that its purpose was to be part of a float, if you will, and that float indicated the water level in the king's chamber, and then opened and closed automatically the valve that was in the antechamber. So that's what we think the sarcophagus's purpose was. It has no writing on it, and neither does the king's chamber or the queen's chamber. All the tombs and temples of ancient Egypt seem to have writing all over them, but the interior of the Great Pyramid doesn't, because it doesn't need any. It's a machine. It's like there's no writing inside of the cylinders of your engine.
Right.
You don't need it. It's not what you do.
Well, Stephen, before we run out of time, I've been noticing you've been posting on Facebook about the Orion Correlation. Why don't you tell us a little something about your theories on that?
Well, there's a theory about the Great Pyramid called the Orion Correlation theory, where various shafts of the Great Pyramid point to significant stars and that type of thing. And it's quite popular right now. We've all read the books and seen the TV documentaries that show the stars lining up with vents and or other kind of correlations, if you will. But I'm kind of very hesitant to agree with any of that, because a correlation has to have a causation to be valid. And the Great Pyramid is just a structure, and just to say because something lines up with a star that it was intended to for some significant reason, that's quite a stretch. Even though some of these stars were significant to an ancient civilization, that doesn't mean that the Great Pyramid was built so that something points to a star, if you will. It's like saying Christianity is important in the USA. Well, in the USA, we built the Hoover Dam. Therefore, the Hoover Dam has something to do with Christianity. And even though the Great Pyramid was built in ancient times, doesn't mean that it was necessarily symbolic at all. You can go to anything. The points on the crown of the Statue of Liberty all point to stars. But there's no significance. There's no intent for that. There's no correlation. The streets of New York City, one day a year, they line up with the star. It's called Manhattan Hinge, because the streets of Manhattan line up. Well, it's just coincidental. There's no significance. Even though there's a precise correlation, there's no significance. And the problem with the Orion Correlation theory that I see is that there's no corroborative evidence to indicate that anything is intended to point to anything. Everything that points up points to the stars, but that doesn't mean that it's intended to. So that's a problem I see with the Orion Correlation theory. There's no corroboration to validate a correlation. Correlations don't validate correlations. That is called circular reasoning. So even though people have come up with correlations, they fiddle with the math, or they use every unit of measure possible and compare the sides of the Great Pyramid and the length and everything. They compare it with everything there ever was and come up with some correlation. That doesn't mean it was intended by the original builders. So that's my reservation about the Orion Correlation theory.
Well, what about the fact that, at least according to what I've read online, that Giza is not the only place that has these correlation, that they're on pyramids all the way around the world. Would that make any difference?
Well, it would be like an explanation for that is maybe some of these other correlations are made up too. But even, let's say there's a whole bunch of cathedrals in Europe, okay, that have to do with symbolic religious stuff. And then you find a hydroelectric dam, okay? It's even though it's made by the same civilization that made the cathedrals, it doesn't mean that the hydroelectric dam was meant to have any symbolic purpose or any alignment. So there's a correlation between pirates and global warming. And you can read about it on the web. There's been articles about it. It's a very precise correlation. The less pirates you have, the greater the global warming. And they have charts about that and everything. The only thing is, there's no causal relationship between the two, even though it's a precise correlation. And people have a tendency to see a correlation when it's not really significant. And that's something you have to resist doing. And if people have done that with the Great Pyramid. There's been another correlation theory in the past called the biblical correlation theory or pyramidology. And people have seen correlations between the Great Pyramid and the Bible, and with using various units of measure and various angles and stuff, that the Great Pyramid predicted where Jesus will be born.
I've read that.
Yeah, it's there's a whole theory about that, but it's not popular anymore because people have come to understand that there's no causal relationship between the Bible and the Great Pyramid. And just because an ancient society was religious or whatever doesn't mean that the Great Pyramid is a religious building, to me.
So what we're talking about here ain't so much that the correlations don't exist, as there's no causal purpose for them. It's not like they were intended or deliberate. It just happened to work out that way.
Right. Yeah. There's no evidence to indicate that the original builders intended any Great Pyramid correlation to be significant. But people look at the stars and then they look at the Great Pyramid and then they just assume that the vents are built to point to something. It's a lot of assumptions, if you will, with not enough corroboration. And I've been doing some research. I've recently finished a magazine article that I'm going to submit here right away. I've been doing a number of magazine articles about some of the issues with the Orion Correlation theory. So we'll see. Hopefully that'll get published someday, and it'll certainly generate some interest. I know that.
Or some debate. Actually, debate is still interesting, isn't it?
It is. I enjoy debate and everything. That's the Socratic method, and through debate and dialogue, truth emerges, they say. So we hopefully people will evaluate our research that has been compiled in my 2 books and see if that direction of research has any value. The Great Pyramid is a 45-story skyscraper with exhibiting some very high technology, and we focus on the technology of the Great Pyramid, on how it was built and why it was built.
Okay, and that's at thepump.org?
Yes.
And you also got your website, www.stephenmyers.org.
Yeah, that's a sister site, and that's for me personally. But either one will get a lot of information out about either what I've been doing personally or what our website will tell what our foundation has been up to, including some of our fundraising activities, our goals, and our mission statement. So hopefully the people will find that of interest. You can also click on some of our sponsors that have been involved in what we're doing, and as a nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible.
All right. Now, are there any other things going on that you'd like to mention that I haven't brought up yet?
Oh, gee. Well, we've got the magazine articles. I've published a few of those that are out in several magazines, and we have some articles coming up. We are doing just the research and development for some new technology that is in the works. From our website, you can like us on Facebook, and that's always fun to see what we're doing on Facebook. And even our links page has a number of links for more information that's related to our research. So I hope people will come by our website, and you can also contact us through our website, through our email, and we also have a phone number that we can give out, which is 541-824-0032, and you can give us a call at our hotline and leave a message. We're not always here. So in our postal address, we're out in southwestern Oregon. That's on our website. So if you have a question, please contact us, and we make ourselves available and answer our email in a timely manner.
All right. Well, in that case, have you got any last-minute thoughts for everybody?
Well, what I think people should do is realize that the Great Pyramid isn't just some dusty old building that has no relevance in modern times, but that the Great Pyramid was a solution to a problem that ancient people had. In modern times, they built the High Aswan Dam for a solution to a problem. And the High Aswan Dam in the Nile Valley generates a lot of electricity, and they use that electricity to irrigate farmland. And in ancient times, they did a similar thing. They built a huge building in the valley of the Nile, and this building was used for pumping water. And the two huge buildings in the valley of the Nile operate differently, but they were able to solve problems and provide prosperity for the civilizations that built it. And that's an explanation as to why the Great Pyramid was built, and we want to redevelop that ancient but very efficient water pumping technology to help our modern world become a cleaner and safer place with an alternative energy source. So that's what our foundation is all about.
Try to get away from fossil fuel.
Absolutely. That's and the geopolitical effects of fossil fuel. All of this stuff in the Middle East, and even down in the Gulf Coast with that big pollution thing that happened a few years ago. All of that just so we can go from one place to another. Oh boy.
It used to be a nightmare.
Yeah, it's sad. But, everything in the world is either energy or matter, which is one step away from being energy. And energy can neither be created or destroyed. So how can we have an energy crisis?
Well, if matter is also one step away from energy, does that mean matter can neither be created nor destroyed also?
In a way, I guess so. But the point is, we shouldn't be in an energy crisis because we're in an economic crisis because we've settled on energy systems that are centralized, and somebody else decides on how much money we're going to pay for our energy. I know gasoline is a little cheaper right now, but that will change.
Well, I personally don't believe we're in the middle of an energy crisis. I think that people just don't want to do what it takes to supply the energy. I mean, this is very simple technology. You see it in every car out there on the road. Has an alternator that has it's designed to generate electricity as it turns. This could be done on a much larger scale to generate more electricity to cover a bigger area if you want it to. And it's generating it from within the alternator itself, in other words. It's not pulling it from a supply source that you're running out of, in other words.
Well, there's a lot of technology out there, alternative technology. We've all seen the YouTube videos of different guys showing the things that they've made in their garage. And this technology in my second book, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, is just another alternative that we think was available in ancient times, but we want to make it available in modern times.
Right. Well, are you planning on a third book?
There's some talk about that. Hopefully there'll be a third book, and there's certainly some magazine articles doing the few lectures here locally, and we're also planning on another trip back to Egypt. We're working on funding for that, so if anyone is interested in accompanying us on a trip to Egypt, that would be something they could contact us about. And, of course, funding to build our water pump, if people want to contact us and find out just what we're doing, and we will explain to them all of our activities.
All right, that sounds like a winner to me. I showed that it's 4:56. I want to thank you for coming to be my guest again. I really missed having you on, and I really enjoyed the show today. I'd also like to remind everybody not to forget to stop by www.freedomslips.com. Thursday, I'll be talking to Dan Willis about Nazis of Arctica. I'm sorry, I got tongue-tied there. From 1 to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's sure to be a show you don't want to miss. I think we're going to also discuss a little bit of Atlantis under ice while we're at it. So you folks, make sure you stop by and visit us. I'm going to be putting up some new stuff on my site in the near future as soon as I can stay out of the hospital long enough to get it done. If I miss any shows, I'll send word around about rescheduling it, because I'll be honest, folks, I never know when I'm going to go in the hospital, and it's been pretty frequent lately, so I'll just do the best I can and try to keep everybody posted. With that, I'm going to go join my wife and my son, and we're going to have some supper.
Well, enjoy that good supper.
And, Stephen, you have a good day. Enjoy yourself. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll get this here posted to YouTube, and I'll send you the link.
Oh, that'll be great, and thank you for having me on your show. I was honored to be on your show.
It was an honor to have you here, too. And don't be too bashful to ask the next time.
Well, great. I'll do that. That would be great.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. You have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye, everybody.